Hello, welcome to another episode of by Wanxiety podcast. Today we have the lovely Angie. You may also know her as Brooklyn Food Lady on Instagram. And she is going to talk about how she started her blog and how she recently quit her job to pursue the growth of her blog. Do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited for your podcast. I think it's super important for so many people, especially with workplace anxiety. I feel like, post-COVID, there's been kind of this reckoning with what are we doing in our corporate jobs, and what do I actually want to do with my life? At least I've noticed that with a lot of my friends. So yeah, excited to chat about that.
So what made you initially start Brooklyn Food Lady?
So I was at a startup for a couple of years, and in summer of 2023, it was like it suddenly folded. Everyone was blindsided. The entire Angie team was laid off. I should clarify, I was working as a software engineer, and I was kind of left not knowing what to do with my life. It was a very existential moment, and I remember I was journaling and reading back through some of my old journal entries, and I found one from May of 2020 where I was like, okay, I like food, I like writing, I should be a food writer, right? And then I was literally listed out all my doubts and anxieties, no, but this is why I would never work out. And when I went back and saw it, after I got laid off, I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose. And so I just sat down on my computer one day and inspiration struck, and I wrote my first blog post, and it just kind of grew from there.
I remember your first blog post. Yeah, I remember seeing it. I was like, this is amazing. You're talking about why you wanted to start it.
Yeah.
And you just reached 10,000 organic followers. I also saw that one of your reel has almost 1 million views, which is amazing. That's so hard to achieve, right? What has been your favorite part about doing this so far?
But I think my favorite part, since the very beginning, was the storytelling aspect. And that's the part that drew me to it in the first place. I remember being in college, and my first, I think, real instance of food storytelling was I was eating cup noodles and watching Chef's Table. And it was, the most beautiful food, but it also gave the chefs backstories. And I was like, wow, there's such a rich story. And I was like, there are so many chefs like that in New York. They might not have a Michelin star, but they have stories. And I'm, coming from an immigrant family, I really wanted to focus on those stories too. So I think, just being able to be trusted with someone's story and to share it and have it resonate with people and have them feel so proud to see their own voice amplified has been super rewarding for me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You recently quit your job, right? After you hit 10,000 followers?
I gave my notice before. It was I think a lot of things were happening at once. Yeah. I actually hit 10,000 followers the day before my birthday. So it's the best birthday gift.
That's an awesome birthday gift. How did you come to that? What was the final point that you were what that made you decide okay, I can do this. It's time for me to quit my job and pursue what I love. Because you love food blogging very much. So
it was actually a very long journey, if you'll indulge me. That kind of started during COVID when, I was a new grad and really ambitious in my career, working to get promoted and climb the ladder and all of that fun stuff. And then after the pandemic hit and we started working remotely, I remember just feeling so isolated and disengaged with my work. And I think being away from that setting and the camaraderie of my coworkers, I was just what the fuck am I even doing? Sorry, can I swear? That's okay. I was why am I even doing this? I'm pushing, it's very cynical. And, I think software engineering is very important, but I just felt I personally was pushing pixels across a page. And I'm there has to be more to life than this, right? Especially when you saw all the crazy shit that was happening with the pandemic and frontline workers. I'm I just felt a little bit of cognitive dissonance, and that really grew. And I went through this phase where I really had to learn how to divorce my career from my identity and be okay, my self-worth is not tied to my productivity. And I went through that phase, and continued working software jobs, but had a little bit more space to really like develop hobbies. I took up pottery, did a bunch of like, I do running and stuff. I run. And I think most recently, so after I got laid off from the job I mentioned, I started my food blog. That was great. But then, eventually I was like, I need money. I need a visa because I'm Canadian. And so I got my most recent job kind of with this expectation, like I'm doing it strictly to fund my passions. And can I still achieve a sort of balance there? And I think it was just this disengagement just grew where it was like, I didn't really care about the company I was working for, the work I was doing. And I describe it as a misalignment where I'm like, I am not living according to the things I value, which is human connection, storytelling. And it grew to a point, and I think there was also anxiety tied to that because I'm like, this is a good job. I should be like more proactive. I should be excelling. And that should caused a lot of doubt and anxiety to the point where one day I was like, you know what? I can't live like this anymore. And like I said, I had a birthday coming up. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to quit and figure it out. And I think I knew like my dream was to work on my food blog full time one day. My plan was to already kind of start building it up as a business before quitting my job. I did not do that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That's amazing though, because like so many people are afraid to pursue their passion. I mean, we all have bills to pay, and it's scary, to think about like not being able to support yourself. And in New York, anywhere is really expensive, but New York is extra expensive.
Right.
But yeah,
I do want to call out, that I'm very privileged to be able to have been able to make that decision. Like for some reason I had a lucrative job before and I have a supportive partner. So I feel very fortunate to be able to pursue my passions.
That's awesome. What is your favorite restaurant in New York at the moment?
Don't ask me that. How do I answer that? How do I answer that? Well, one that is a go-to for my partner and I is Antidote. It's a Sichuan restaurant in Williamsburg. Amazing Chinese food, properly spicy, super consistent. And I love they have a green peppercorn fish stew that I could just drink. Like, I'm like thinking about it right now. But yeah, Antidote's a great one in general. I'm trying to think if there's been one I went to recently that I really loved. There's a little ramen counter over in the Bowery Market called Ramen by Raw. And Chef Rashida, she is doing incredible, innovative things with ramen. She like the concept is breakfast ramen, and she does like a bacon, egg, and cheese one.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing.
There's a gravlax one, which I don't even know how it works, but it's incredible. So yeah, she doesn't miss. There's so many. I mean,
it's hard in New York. Yeah, it's hard in New York to choose a place to eat. I mean, I find like sometimes when I'm trying to order it in, I feel like I'm spending 1 hour just look at restaurants like, what do I want to eat tonight? So now that you're running your Brooklyn Food Lady full time, what does your day-to-day look like?
Well, it's only been a week, so I've been trying to figure out exactly what my day-to-day looks like. And admittedly, I'm not the best with routine. So trying to be like, have structure, but be flexible. I'm trying to set aside at least one day a week to be like full on like admin mode, at my computer doing the outreach and all the correspondence and stuff. And then I'm basically going every day to try new places, which I would have been doing anyway. So that part's pretty consistent. I really should be cooking more at home. Don't ask me how much I spent on food last month, but I've also been thinking about kind of investing more time to explore specific neighborhoods. So I think in the future, I'll like set aside at least one day a week to go to a new neighborhood, really explore, and then I'm sure I'll need to set aside a day or two for editing alone because I'm like kind of starting from scratch, learning that. Trying to figure it out, honestly, and not get overwhelmed.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice. You're learning a lot of new valuable skills as well,
Absolutely.
like with editing and kind of video, and then you're getting to explore the city. Because I mean, you moved here 2-3 years ago?
2019, so 5 years ago.
2019, 5 years. And New York is a big place. I've been here like over 10 years, and I still haven't been to some of the neighborhoods, I'm not going to lie.
Girl.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody, listeners, that is thinking about starting a food blog or following their passion? Like, do you have any advice? Things you would do, things you wouldn't do again?
I feel like if you asked me this a year from now, I might have even more insight. But so far, just a year into my food blog, I think my biggest piece of advice is, if you can, just go for it. If you have that project you're thinking about, you're like, oh, when the time is right, I'm going to do it. Just go for it. Like you launching this podcast, right? It's like, if you want to do something, oftentimes I feel like I'm my biggest critic and I'm like the biggest force that's holding myself back. And self-doubt is a bitch. And like, I remember like 4 years ago, I wanted to start this food blog, right? And sometimes I kick myself that I waited this long. But when it finally happened, I just sat down on my computer and started writing. And in my head, I had this image of what it was supposed to be. Like, oh, I have to have like a month's worth of content before I start, and I have to have all these interviews lined up. And then one day I sat down and wrote, and that was the start of it. And everything else fell into place. So I think, really just going for it, taking the first step, getting started is the hardest part. It still is for me a lot of times with projects, and overcoming like a perfectionist mindset, which I think maybe a lot of creators struggle with. There's this one kind of snippet from Ira Glass that I listen to every day, and it's called The Gap. And he talks about like, when you're doing creative work at the beginning, there's always going to be this gap between your taste and your expectation and the work you're producing. And the only way to close that gap is through just putting out a huge volume of work. And so I try to really remember that when, sometimes I put out content and I'm like, this isn't how I wanted it to look in my head. Go for it. Be consistent.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Is so inspirational. I am so excited for you to reach 100,000 followers by the end of the year. I know it's going to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, your content's amazing. You make me so hungry when I check my Instagram. I'm like, oh my God. Do you know how many places I've tagged that you've gone to?
Girl. Thank you for your support.
To end this, I would like to share some of my favorite moments from Brooklyn Food Lady's Instagram. So here we go.